So, let's skip ahead to where the run starts. And I'm just going to let it play in its entirety. So we do the run on casual because it's the easiest to kill things, so it's the fastest. The pet type doesn't really matter. We pick Ember Mage because we get to do a bunch of broken stuff with Ember Mage. So timing starts when you click single player. So in this first zone here, I put my mini-map to the center of my screen and I keep it there the whole game. I set my pet to aggressive because it helps me kill things early on in the game, especially before I hit level 7. So this first zone here is mostly just trying to get XP while getting through the zone as fast as possible, which is pretty much true for most of the zones up until level 7. I'm trying to make some small micro optimizations with cutting corners and rather than running to things and hitting them, using fireballs if I know I'm gonna have to walk out of my way to them. Lining up shots with fireballs so that they hit more than one thing, or trying to use my staff and melee to cleave. I really don't want to have to use any potions in this zone, so I will pretty much never heal regardless of what happens to me in the zone. I got a monster shrine in the zone, which I've never really had happen before, and I think it's actually like really, really, really good. It gives you an insane amount of XP for what it is, and I was able to get more potions later on because of the amount of gold I got from this. That zone was pretty alright. So in the first town visit here, we go to turn in the quest. You don't have to pick up this quest, and we take a staff reward off of it. Then we go unskill this quest. While I'm walking over here, I spend a stat point. I talk to this quest giver and look at his items to see if any of them have desirable stats, specifically mana regen. And then I go spend the rest of my stat points while I'm leaving the zone here. So the staff you get off of that quest can either be used at level 2 or 3. You're not always level 3 at this point, but you want the level 3 staffs preferably because they generally do more damage, and you'll be using that staff for a good amount of time unless you get lucky. Once you hit level 3, you can spend your skill points, and then you'll definitely be able to use the staff. I can't think of any times where I've gotten a staff off that quest where I couldn't use at least by level 3, so... again, this zone here, you're just trying to get through and clear through as fast as possible. Perfectly, you would get through this zone at level 4, but that's not always the case. It's pretty normal to get through here at 3 or 3.5 in terms of EXP. Especially if you're doing the run for the first time. It may be a good idea to go do that side quest dungeon over there, just to make sure you get enough XP to hit 7 in time for the boss that's coming up. When you're going for record pace runs like this, you skip a lot of effective areas for experience because you need to be doing progression at the same time as leveling. The zone was not the best in terms of layout, unfortunately. So I was doing alright on XP and I was on an okay pace, so it wasn't too bad. I got an elite here, which was pretty nice. I think I actually died here, which is kind of funny. I think. I don't remember. Yeah, I died here because I was too greedy on my health potions because I was low on them and I didn't want to have to use them if I didn't have to. So I'm making my way to this star on the southwest over here. I picked up that quest in town. The quest in that town is useful. It's the only side quest I technically do during the run, and it's because it gives you an insane amount of XP, and it can also be on the way to this first dungeon. I guess in theory you could not have to do this, but the amount of luck that would be required to not do this is pretty astronomical. It's just so effective XP, and the loot you can get off of the quest can also be run changing. So it's just way too good to pass on. There's a champion outside of it too, which is really, really lucky. It's pretty often that there'll be a champion very nearby to where this quest happens at. And there's already 2 champions that are a part of the quest itself that you kill. So, um, caught me up a lot on XP that I needed badly at this point. So you'll notice that I'm using my melee a lot. A lot of these enemies that I'm meleeing, I can, if I high roll on damage and I don't get a fumble, which is basically like a critical fail, I can kill them in one swing and potentially cleave and kill 2. But more importantly than that, I don't have to spend mana to do so. I forget the exact number, but if the prismatic bolts aren't hitting at least, I think 4 out of 5, like if 2 of them are hitting the ground, it's actually better to be meleeing in terms of damage output. But hitting all 5 bolts is definitely better than meleeing. It's just mana, the whole trade-off between mana efficiency and micro optimizations there. So you notice I've been clicking on a lot of these things on the ground. I forgot to mention this during the first zone in the game, but I click on all the corpses there as well too. Trying to make sure I have enough potions for this dungeon right here, because you can lose a lot of time if you run out of potions. You have to play way too careful, and you just want to be able to run through and kill things without much care. So I was about level 5.5 when I got to the zone at 6 minutes. Generally that means I will be fine on XP, but the time that I complete this dungeon is going to be the concern. So I will be more selective on what enemies I kill than normal. So like that shield guy that I just skipped right there, and I will be trying to find the exit faster. This is one of the few dungeons in the game where you don't always necessarily want to find the exit right away, because you need to route a certain amount of XP before you get to the end of this dungeon. You need to hit level 7. This fight was pretty time consuming. I definitely lost a bit of time here, but this was too good of the XP was too good for me to pass up on. Unfortunately, Shocking and Swift are pretty deadly, and these guys can be really annoying to fight against if they start rezzing dudes, but fortunately the ones I got here don't have the res spell, but they are hitting like a truck. And if you run into these guys in like a tiny hallway or something, they can be very deadly. At the very least, though, they're definitely not the quickest enemies to kill. Those spellcaster guys and the guys with the shields are generally some of the more annoying champions to deal with, especially early on in the run. So unfortunately I did do a bit of backtracking here, which wasted some time, but I did, and I was ahead on XP for where I like to be in this run. So there's some time that could be saved here. Probably like 20 seconds, if I had to guess. And then probably another 20 seconds in the field before this in that zone. I intentionally turned down the audio really low because it gets really loud later on in the run. So I guess fair warning if you're watching this for the first time. The reason why I'm commentating over this is because there's a glitch that we do later in the run that makes the audio pretty annoying to listen to. It's actually coming up pretty soon, but it gets a lot worse later on after Act 1 for some reason. It's got some weird properties to it that really mess up the audio. I had a lot of deaths. I had 2 deaths in Act 1, actually. That's really unfortunate, but deaths in Act 1 don't mean too much. I'll talk about that more later on in the video, because we're about to hit level 7 and I need to explain what happens at 7. So, once you hit level 7, there's 2 skills you want to grab. There's a passive skill, I forget the name of it, but it's in the first skill slot on the bottom middle. It's a passive that gives you a bunch of extra damage, essentially. But the primary thing you're wanting to grab at level 7 is Shocking Burst. I'm just going to call it Spark, or Sparking, but there's a glitch you do with it where you hold shift, which causes you to stand still, and then you select a target, and then once it flickers once, you want to release it. So right when it's casting the second time, you want to release it, and then that causes it to permanently cast for free. It's normally a channeled skill, you have to stand still and aim, and then every time you cast a spell, so in this case the prismatic bolts that we've been leaving at level 1, it adds another instance of that sparking burst. So your damage is scaling linearly based on what a normal cast of sparking burst is. So this makes our damage absolutely insane, and we kill Grell in like 10 seconds flat, which is normally, at this point, being this underleveled, like over a 1 minute long fight. So it's already saved us about a minute off the run. Which is why you have to route it before you get to Grell. It's just too important. Getting it earlier than that doesn't really help too much. It's nice, but generally you're slowing down to level up at this point of the run. So you want to try to hit 7 like exactly before you get to Grell, ideally. So here we're doing the next glitch in the run. We sell all of our items and then buy resistance potions, which are the most expensive item in this vendor. Now what I'm doing is I'm dragging it from my pet's inventory, which is just my inventory that happens to be the closest. Mike is really quiet. Let me see if I can fix that. I'm not sure what I can do about that. Is it still too quiet if you max out the stream volume? Here, I'm going to pause this for a second so I can try and figure this out. What about now? Is this any better? Sorry about that. Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Let me know if this is any better, I guess. Alright, yeah, sorry, I don't know why that's a problem. I have my mic almost maxed on Streamlabs, so I'm not really quite sure. Anyway, so we spend all of our gold that we have available on resistance potions, and then by dragging the potion from our pet's inventory, which is the closest, we drop it into the armor tab. You can do it with the armor tab or the currency tab here, or the potion tab, but there's another glitch that happens if you use the potion tab that I'm not going to bother explaining. Basically, just use the armor tab. It's safer. So you drag it, you click on it, you release while you're hovered over the armor tab, and then you click again while it's in the vendor's inventory. And what that does is it puts it in their buyback menu, but it gives you an incorrect amount of gold. And that lets you effectively duplicate gold by reselling them potions that you bought from them. So I route out to get to 99 so that way I can dupe gold as fast as possible, and then I dupe all of the gold that I intend on using for the rest of the run. Different people do different amounts. After this run, I'll probably have to route it to be more greedy, honestly, because currently I route for, I believe, around like 80k gold, which allows for like 1 or 2 deaths in the run. It's very, very easy to die in this run. And then you have to calculate how many potions you're expecting to purchase at all of the vendors for the rest of the game, because this is the only vendor that glitch works at. So in Act 1 I buy 20 health potions, 25 mana potions, and then I buy about a dozen teleport scrolls and identify scrolls. This zone, the previous zone I didn't talk about much, but you're just going from point A to point B. So this zone here, you have 2 different objectives. You need to go complete a quest in the mines, and then you need to go complete a quest at the stockade, and pick up 2 key items, and then meet up at a location. Generally, the goblin one is closer, and there's a little bit of like on-the-fly routing that takes place here. Sometimes you can drop a teleport in some locations to save time. That's something I'll probably talk about later on. I believe I did it in Act 3 in this run, but this is a pretty like normal layout. We're pretty much just going from A to B to this goblin mine while making slight detours to kill things for XP. The mine entrance always has this U shape, so you always need to be going directly south, like way off to the east of it to get there without backtracking too much. There's some like slight optimization here. I set off the detonation on these barrels while I'm sparking to save like half a second. But other than that, this zone has very little variation in the layout. So I pretty much know what direction to go, or relatively close enough to it. It generally does this little loop down southwest here. One thing that did happen here, so it's always southwest. If there's a dead end on the southwest track, it does this little cross through pathway. I think that's always the case. I can't think of any patterns where that doesn't happen. And then the boss for the zone is up here. This boss is actually very deadly. Pretty much all of those exploding guys and these barrels can one-shot you. So it wastes about 2 seconds, but I run around and blow them all up first, because dying to this guy wastes 5 or 10 seconds, and it really impacts your gold routing. More so than the time loss. It pretty much means that it's a very impactful death, which means it costs you a lot of gold to die there. So just to be on the safe side, I run around and blow up all the explosives first before committing to the fight. I have to run really far to the stockade on this instance of this map, so I'm going to set up a spark so I can get XP. In terms of leveling, our next goal is level 14 is when we do our next like broken thing, which I'll explain once we get to. So yeah, just trying to cut all these lines as tight as possible. I killed those 2 guys outside of this because you can get insta-gibbed when you're leaving the zone sometimes. There's always a couple of guys to the northwest of that entrance, so I set up a spark there. I run to the south of this first guy so that I can kill both of these 2 guys at the same time, so that they're both inside of my splash damage radius. And then I pick up the key item and leave. While I'm running back, there's about 10 seconds of downtime while I'm running, so I'll do some inventorying or spend some skill points that I'm catching up on. That's a thing you'll notice throughout the whole run, mostly in the first 10 levels primarily, because that's when we actually have enough time to be doing things like that while we're running. So this zone was really close, and I knew I had already cleared about half of it, so I didn't want to spend the time sparking, because I knew there would only be a couple enemies, and it's not really worth the setup time for the spark glitch. Slight misclick here, but I got it on the second try. So, we're really, really underleveled. So when I see an opportunity to find experience, so magic mobs or champions, I'll generally stop and fight them if they're not like absolutely horrible to deal with. Um, I think I skipped maybe like one or two in this whole run, or at least up until 14. So you'll see me occasionally stop and fight something, and that's generally why. This dungeon is definitely a source of RNG. Finding the exit, there's some patterns you can look out for, but it's pretty much just trying to get to A as B as fast as possible without backtracking. That was pretty good. You can get to the exit quicker, but with the pattern I was given, I pretty much got there as fast as I could have. So I pulled him away a little bit to save a little bit of time. He can knock you back, and I wanted him to knock me back in a beneficial direction if he did. So, the little spider things actually give a surprisingly good amount of XP. The little worm things. A lot of the normal mobs actually give equivalent XP in this game. It's not really based on like how difficult they are to kill, so I'll generally always walk out of my way a little bit to take out a big pack of them. We got another champion here, and then we actually had really, really good luck, and there was one right next to it too. So we had a double champion pack. I think I was like level 12 already, which is really, really good by this point of the run. It's pretty normal to be 11 and a half or barely 12, but being 12 and a third is really, really good. I think the highest I've ever been at a good paced run is like level 12 and a half by this point. So we set up the spark glitch, and then the elemental passive we grabbed earlier gives us a chance to shock them, which gives us bonus damage, and then also a chance to freeze them if we crit. So if we roll an early crit in the fight, we have the ability to potentially stun lock the boss, which just makes for a much faster kill time. I ran over here, so I was ready to click on this guy when he spawned, but I accidentally body blocked his spawn position, so I had to move out of the way. That wasted a few seconds. You actually have to stand in a very precise position to do that, so it was unfortunate. So my ending split for Act 1 was 21-21. My gold split is about 40 seconds faster, so in Act 2 we need to buy more potions because we're going to need to regenerate mana more efficiently than we did in Act 1. Our mana requirement's going to skyrocket in a few minutes for the rest of the run. And pretty much us going faster is related to mana regen, and all that jazz. So yeah, I just run through town, buy potions, and go talk to this guy. I buy 40 health potions and 75 mana potions generally. So this zone is a pretty straightforward zone. It's very open. It's got some ridges and things that can be annoying and waste a little bit of time, but generally you don't waste too much time in this zone. That being said, there is a bit of a time save you can do. So if you drop a teleport in a part of the zone that's near the middle of the map, you can save time in about 30 seconds from now, because you're going to have to backtrack. So generally, the entrance is in the northeast, and the Sphinx that we're going to talk to is either in the southeast or the southwest. And then generally, he's going to ask us to go back to the opposite end of the map again. So if we drop a teleport, we can take the waypoint that's right next to him and teleport to our teleport. That sounds a little bit confusing, but it's going to make sense in a second here when I do it, if that was unclear. So we got the quest. I see that it's covered right now with a quest accepted thing, but where we need to go is in the northwest. And so we saved about, I'm going to guess, 10 seconds by dropping that teleport. There's a couple of zones that are like that in this run. It's just some on-the-fly routing that you have to be aware of. And that's why we buy so many teleports throughout the run. There's moments where I will drop teleports because they'll potentially save time later, but I won't always actually use them. So there's a champion here. I'm just going to kill it. I'm almost at 14, so I'm really wanting to make sure I get all the XP I can. The run gets a lot faster once you hit 14. So we got a dividing champion here, which is really good. They give extra XP because you have to go kill the split versions of them once you kill the first one. If there was some kind of way that they could task the game into just like spawning a bunch of dividing champions, I'm sure there would be an absurd task time of like 45 minutes or something. Maybe even faster. I don't know. Maybe like low 40 minutes. But there's just way too much luck to do that. So we're at 13 and some. So I'm going to pull up my skill tree in a little bit here and set up for that. So this Manticore can knock us back, which wastes time. So I'm going to position up against this ridge here so he doesn't knock me back as far. Yeah, it's not a hard fight. It's just they can waste a few seconds if they knock you back. So once again, we're going to use that waypoint that we used earlier to get back to the Sphinx faster. So that was actually crazy lucky. I dropped a socketable gem, which we can get later in the game from a quest reward, but I dropped the correct gem, and it rolled the 50% chance to have mana regen on it, and I had grabbed a ring earlier that happened to have a socketable at the highness level. That's pretty absurd. Normally at this point in the run, you barely have any mana regen, if any at all. So that's pretty crazy fortunate. Especially considering I didn't get any from my quest rewards earlier on. So the reason why we're grabbing so much mana regen is because at level 14 we get, I think it's called Frost Phase, I just call it Teleport. And that pretty much makes our move speed absolutely insane. Also at this point in the run we don't really care about XP anymore, it's just going to be like a side effect of progressing through the game, honestly. So when I don't have to, I'm probably going to avoid sparking, both to avoid the setup time and the lag that it induces on the game, because it's a very laggy glitch. Unfortunately, this zone trolled me really hard, and I lost a lot of time backtracking here. That being said, this floor was pretty much my only like real time loss in Act 2. Pretty much everything else went about as well as it possibly could have. I'm gonna guess this was probably like 30 or 40 seconds lost backtracking here. So you can spark off of this totem while you're waiting for the artificer to spawn. You need to be careful of that bolt attack. If the first one crits, it'll put a debuff on you, and then the other ones will just flat out kill you. I didn't react fast enough to it, but I was lucky enough that I didn't die. He moved around a lot because I didn't get the early stun lock, unfortunately, but the fight wasn't terrible. I've had much worse fights here before. At this point, I realized I was on a really, really good pace. Finishing that dungeon's generally around the halfway point of the run, and I was about a minute ahead of my fastest pace at this point in time. So you get a staff upgrade off of this quest reward here, and my staff wasn't great, so I wanted to go look at it and see if they had one that I wanted in particular. I got a 230 DPS staff off of that, and I'm pretty sure I ended up using that for the rest of the run. Yeah, I don't think I got anything else. Act 2 is generally when you're going to have the last opportunity to get gear that you're going to use for the rest of the run. The second half of Act 2 here has a lot of downtime where you have time to look through your inventory and gear up, and it's also generally the last time that you're going to actually be at a level where gear is usable. You'll be able to use high focus gear in Act 3 sometimes, but you're not going to meet any of the other requirements throughout the rest of the run to use any other gear. And this is generally the last time you're going to see like level 20 equipment or so. So with the exception of like caster equipment you can buy off of the Gambler in Act 3, this is pretty much when you're figuring out what your gear is going to look like for the rest of the run, outside of some anomalies. So here I got pretty lucky and had a really, really good pattern for the second half of Act 2. I had a close Jin, and the waypoint was very close to this side quest that you have to, or this, not a side quest, sorry, this quest you have to complete, which is going to save a lot of time. This iirc fight I like to take carefully because iirc himself hits hard, but he has a side, like a champion next to him that hits with fireballs that are really, really brutal. And the little ribs that he sits around are walls that you can take splash damage from. So if you get unlucky, you can get insta-killed by fireballs, and I didn't want to risk the death because I was pretty tight on gold right now. So because of the layout of this zone, I was able to go back to the waypoint and teleport to my teleport to save time on getting back to the Jin. This saved probably another solid like 30 seconds. Normally there's a lot of backtracking and running around you have to do in this zone, but luckily I was able to cut a lot of that out because of the placements of those objectives. So I didn't get a ton of loot at this point in the run, unfortunately. You can have like almost a full inventory at this point in time sometimes, but I did not in this case. My gear is already pretty good though, so it's not too bad. Normally you're getting into the zone with like a pretty mediocre staff and like maybe one other piece of gear, but I have a pretty good staff, and the rest of my gear is already quite good. So I'm still looking for upgrades here, but not too upset if I don't find anything at this point. So this zone's an auto-scroller. It kind of works in segments. As far as I'm aware, it goes faster, a little bit faster if you kill these things quickly. So I try to blink around and kill them as quick as I can. I think it's specifically tied to the champion mobs, but I'm not really sure entirely. The zone is pretty slow. It takes like 3 minutes. There's another segment later that you can actually speed up a bit that I think I kind of discovered some time saves for. But the part with the light, there's not really a whole lot you can do to save. It's more so just trying to not lose time. And there's some parts of this where it's actually very easy to die. And dying pretty much loses about 10 seconds here. Luckily, deaths are not very gold expensive because you have to teleport to the start of the zone. But it teleports you back to where the light is automatically. Something I also wanted to mention is I have a helmet that has cast speed on it that's super nice. It lets me teleport quicker, which is one of the few ways other than mana regen to save time with movement. So here's a part of the run, or part of the auto-scroller that's, I guess, deceptively scary. So there's a large boss I need to kill here to progress the auto-scroller as fast as possible, but these enemies that spawn behind me can actually one-shot me if they crit. So I want to kill that guy as fast as possible and then teleport to dodge their attacks, hopefully, if I do it properly. So this zone has rising platforms, and the rising platforms require me to kill certain enemies to rise the next platforms and then stand adjacent to them. So you'll see me try to stand in some specific locations to cause as many platforms to rise as fast as possible after killing champions. So if you notice here, I kill that guy and I go walk around the perimeter as quickly as I can to raise the platforms up. I'm pretty sure I save a good amount of time here compared to some other runs because I don't think other people were aware of this. This was something I think I discovered fairly recently. So again, here I'm going to teleport to where the platforms are rising because it'll make them rise a little bit quicker rather than just running straight across them. So I got a really odd bug here that I'm not really sure what caused this. I tried to press tab to fix my minimap. It's supposed to show where the exit is on the minimap through like the fog of war here, and it just didn't. Luckily I'm pretty familiar with this layout pattern, so I still like knew roughly where the exit was going to be. It didn't waste as much time, but I probably lost like 5 seconds here just I don't know. This is very weird. I've never seen this happen before. If anybody knows, let me know. So this is the last kind of, or one of the last kind of chill moments in the run. This is generally your last chance to find equipment upgrades realistically. So I'll be picking up things in between the waves of this boss fight to identify items and see if they're upgrades for me. But yeah, I have just, this is a part of the run that's incredibly loud. I have my YouTube audio on about 5% here, and I'm talking at like normal conversational volume, I guess, and it's still this loud. This glitch gets very, very loud as it scales the spark, unfortunately. So when you kill that boss, he drops a lamp, and you won't be able to talk to him until you pick up that lamp. So you need to spam his loot drops to try and pick up the lamp quickly. Just a small optimization. So after we complete that, we go back to town, talk to the big dude in town, and then we warp back to the zone. And we head to the next zone, which is this little monolith thing that has to lower. It takes about a second, so you can take a glance at your quest return then if you want. This zone is actually surprisingly scary. Things can shock you in this zone, which is a damage debuff, and can also stun you. So while it's not the worst zone, I guess, per se, it's a deceptively scary zone because you're going to finish up Act 2, so you're trying to go fast and you're thinking about the boss fight you have upcoming, but I've had more than a fair share of deaths in this zone before, and I've already had several close calls. The Siege Guardian is generally the hardest boss fight in the game. He can do pretty much like 5 different attacks that can all, in different situations, one-shot you. And he's also very hard to stun lock because of how high his armor and resistances are. If he bashes you into one of these pillars and they crumble, it's going to one-shot you like no questions asked. So when you see me teleporting there, I'm trying to dodge attacks that I believe will just kill me flat out. It's also very bad to die during that fight, unfortunately, too, because it wastes probably 15 seconds. And then it's also very expensive on your gold because it's basically the last fight before you go spend the rest of your gold for the run. So it can just kill runs if you lose too much gold right there. So right when we get to Act 3, the first thing I do is I go talk to this vendor. I buy 90 mana potions and 35 health potions, and then generally I'll try and buy a couple more, especially mana potions, just to be on the safe side of things. I actually ended up being pretty tight on mana potions throughout this run, so it was good that I chose to do that. Unfortunately, I wasted about 5 seconds talking to that gambler. I thought I had more gold than I had, and I was trying to get a socketable for later on in the run when you get that gem again. There was just no reason for me to do that. It's about a 5-second time waste that could have been avoided. So the first part of Act 3 is pretty fun because there's not a whole lot that's terribly scary at this part of the run. Nothing really hits terribly hard, and we're going really, really fast, and the zones are usually pretty nice. So here's where you really kind of start to feel how broken like the teleport is and how fast you can use it. Like we just went through, or basically we go through 2 major zones of Act 2 in about a minute. Just because of how powerful teleport is as a movement ability in this run. So because of the mana regen I got earlier in the run, I didn't actually lose any time teleporting. You lose time when you're teleporting when you run out of mana. So mana regen is saving you time when you're like very, very low mana, because without that mana regen you would be essentially out of mana, which is just time wasted. So the mana regen I had probably already has saved me a few seconds in the run from that drop that I got. This zone is always the same. You basically just hug this right wall and it'll take you to the teleport. For some reason there's like a lore book back there that's like listed as an objective on the map, the mini-map, the little star there. You don't have to click on it. It's, I think, the only time in the game where they do that for some reason. This boss fight's usually pretty easy. You can spark off the wolves before the boss even spawns, which lets you get your damage ramped up and going early on in the fight. So here we just return the key item we just picked up. I routed a little bit conservatively on the way back because I didn't want to run into a dead end in the fog of war that I wasn't aware of, and I knew the pathway would be pretty clear that way. I just got the gem off of the guy with the detonator there, and I picked it up because when you pick up the gem it'll show you with the highlight on your gear if you can equip it to anything, and unfortunately I didn't have any gear equipped that I could socket it to. I just wanted to double check really quickly with that while I was waiting for the detonator to go off. So we have another glitch coming up here at this boss. Bloatfang is one of the 2 bosses in the game that we can just flat out skip. It's a little bit faster to skip him than it is to kill him, and this is one of the more easier clips to do in the game. He has two of his moves will shove us through this gate if we have a good angle. Usually it's pretty forgiving. Unfortunately here he got too close to the gate and I didn't have a right angle, so I had to pull him away from the gate a little bit. And then he was really nice to me here. Normally it takes 2 moves to get through this gate, and he did it in 1 from a pretty clean angle. So you gotta pick up the quest gem there to complete the key, or for the key item for this quest turn in. You have to open the chest to cause the portal to spawn. You gotta turn it in, and then you go do the second half of Act 3. So this zone can have some gates you have to click to get through. There's some patterns that are a little troll with dead ends. Like, I think I run into one up here. Yeah, right here. Wastes a couple of seconds. But other than that, the zone's pretty straightforward. There's some champion mobs you can run into that can be a little bit scary, but you can just blink through them if you're, or teleport through them if you're fortunate. So you want to make sure you grab the waypoint in the zone because you can save a lot of time here potentially. This is another zone that you can potentially teleport to save time in, so you want to make sure you have the waypoint access. Generally, all of the dungeons in this game that have like major act bosses have random floors that have unmarked exits. which is where most of the RNG comes from in this run on backtracking. A lot of these overworld zones are generally pretty open and forgiving, and you can generally travel in a pretty straight line. So we're gonna go fight this, which is a dragon in Act 3. From this point on in the run, unfortunately, a lot of the time save or time loss is pretty RNG based. There's 8 floors that we need to go through, and there's 4 boss fights, all of which can gain us or lose us a lot of times. A lot of time. And with about 8 minutes left in the run, you can lose up to like 2.5 minutes, sometimes 3 minutes if you're very unlucky. So the first zone was really nice to me. It was pretty much, I basically had a straight shot to the next floor. So as soon as I see all that gold, I know it's not this way, so I backtrack. And now I'm basically just exploring the perimeter because my intuition was not correct, basically. I know it's not in the center of the room because there's no patterns where that can happen. Well, there's one pattern where it can be in the center of the room, but it doesn't look like that on the perimeter of the room. So this fight's pretty scary. He can kill us with a lot of moves, but he's also pretty easy to stun lock. His ads hit really hard too, though, but I don't want to drop the stun lock, so I just let them hit me, and I kind of just hope they don't kill me. This is another part of the game that's really loud. So when you open that chest, the crown pops out in a random direction, and it can actually land on the teleporter that comes from the boss. And when that happens, it's pretty troll. You have to stand off and on the teleporter about 10 times to actually pick up the key item. It's pretty annoying. So here I go back to the waypoint because it saves like maybe 3 or 5 seconds over running all the way back. And now we're on to finish up Act 3. This zone here is 95% the same every single time. These levers are always in the same place, but you can't always click on them for free. Unfortunately here there was things blocking the lever, and the game doesn't like it when you try to click on levers when there's dudes right there, unfortunately. So oddly enough, I was actually able to click on the lever. Usually that's the tricky part when there's dudes right on top of the lever, but it wouldn't let me teleport out to leave for some reason. I got stunned by something, and then the other guy, the big guy, crit me, which was pretty unfortunate. This is the other boss fight in the game that you can skip. This wall is a lot thicker, and he only has 1 out of his 4 moves that can actually clip you through the wall. This was a big time save over my previous record run. That fight was basically about as clean as it can get. Killing him normally is a huge pain. He's one of the slowest bosses to kill in the game. It probably takes about 40 seconds. I accidentally blocked the golem there from opening the door for me. I've never done that before. Didn't really know that was possible. I just kind of realized it when he started spinning in circles. Probably wasted like a second. My Act 3 was about 1 minute and 20 seconds slower than my best ever Act 3. And that was partly due to zone RNG with the exits on this dungeon, and also the Bloatfang fight taking a little bit of readjustment. Act 4 is a pretty big source of RNG. The only thing you can really do to save time is have good pattern recognition, so be very familiar with the layouts that are possible in Act 4. And also mana regen and cast speed. So there's 3 random floors, there's the alchemist fight, there's 3 random floors, and then there's the netherlord fight, which is the end of the game. The first floor wasn't very nice to me. I had to do a good bit of backtracking. The second floor wasn't too bad. It was pretty fine. It wasn't great, but it wasn't bad either. I accidentally bonked into this dead end. I knew that wasn't the pattern, or it wasn't a good pattern, but I didn't recognize it fast enough. So here I see the alchemist in the exit, the alchemist exit in the distance, so I can go run over to it, even though it hasn't shown up on my minimap just yet. The puzzle, I guess, leading up to the alchemist is always the same. So this is kind of just memorization. I have to wait a second here for the teleport to trigger so I can set up the spark here. This is a visual glitch. This happens sometimes throughout the run. Don't worry if this happens. It's just a weird side effect of the spark glitch. Once you click on that, this valve opens. That golem technically has enough knockback to knock you through that steam pipe, but it saves like 5 seconds, and if you die you lose about 30 seconds here, and I can only get that clip about 10% of the time, so it's generally not really worth it, but it does technically save time. So the alchemist is a really easy fight if you stun lock him, and he can just kill your run if you get really unlucky. He has 3 phases to him. I stand here on the second phase so that I don't get hit by the map hazards of the fire. And then I stand here for the same reason. You can also stand on the southwest side of him. I'm probably going to do that in future runs, but it doesn't make too big of a difference. You need to make sure you grab the heart here off of that boss, or else your run is going to be invalid. That's the key item that you need to finish the game. So here I bonked and realized I had the same pattern that I had on floor 3, about here, so I know exactly where the exit is. So I bonked there and almost died. My intuition was incorrect, so I have to do some backtracking. And then I realized it was actually up here. So here's the Nether Beast fight. It takes a second for this teleporter to load in. It's one of the only teleporters you can run onto early in the game, actually. Like, preemptively before it's ready. Here, it takes a second for the boss to come out, so I take a last second look at any of my items just in case I have like a weapon upgrade that will let me do more damage here. Minus armor on hit is very important to have on your staffs for the last 2 boss fights, but unfortunately I wasn't able to find a good one. So I'm just using a 230 DPS staff here. If you stun lock him, this fight looks really, really easy. If you don't, this is a really hard fight, because pretty much everything he can do, if it crits, can kill you. And if the fight goes long enough, he starts spawning ads, and he gets buffs, and it's just really bad. Time ends once you kill the second phase of the fight, and click on the clockwork core when you have the heart in your inventory. I retimed the splits for this, and I did my starting splits correctly, but my ending splits were off by a little bit. The actual end time was 52:02.7. My sum of best is 49:39. So there's about 2 minutes and 30 seconds or so of time save in the run, plus probably like I could see the sum of best going down maybe another minute within reason, so like a high 58 sum of best. To achieve a sub 50 run, you would basically have to be able to perfectly memorize all of the random dungeons. So know all of the possible patterns to a T and know how to get to A to B as fast as possible, and then also reset for a very, very good pre-Grell run. Probably also would need to drop some items with mana regen and potentially find a speed shrine, which I didn't do in this run. There's the Grell dungeon that's random, the end of Act 1 dungeon, I forget the name of the boss right now. That dungeon's random. The Manticore dungeon is technically random, but it's usually pretty linear, so that usually doesn't have any backtracking. That's too bad. The Forsaken Vaults dungeon has 2 floors of randomness, so that's 2, 4, 5, 7. The zone that leads up to the Jin fight is technically random, and you can also lose a little bit of time here in the zone. It's usually not too bad though. It's a pretty easy pattern to learn. And then at the end of Act 2, there's one other zone that's pretty random that can be a troll. The floor here has some patterns that you'll need to be familiar with. And then this dungeon has 2 floors of randomness. So that's 9. And then there's there's 6 more in Act 4, which makes 15. So there's 15 that you can potentially lose time in, and then there's a handful more that you need to be familiar enough that you can follow the linear route consistently. So